any event, I think from the legislature's perspective, what we need to do is watch what happens, and if the signatures are gathered, I've called for, we need to call a special session, put this on the ballot as quickly as possible. So whatever happens, we need an answer. We need certainty. We need finality, and that's what I anticipate will happen. So what I think I can tell teachers is, at least for this next school year, when you start, the budget is the budget. The budget has been passed. That pay raise was inside the budget. Starting July 1, when the new budget goes into effect, local school districts are going to be receiving the amount of money to pay for that pay raise, and that money is going to continue. When we were in special session, there were lots of talk about, whether that money should be directed to education or go into the general fund. This is why the legislature did it the way they did it and sent the money to the general fund. Because even if that money doesn't come in, we just had the largest collections in the history of the state of Oklahoma last month. There will be enough money to continue with that pay raise even while this is put on the ballot. Now, if this were to be repealed, there is some questions as to whether or not there would be enough money to continue on with that additional $500 million, which was given to common education, and it's hard to understand where that would come from, were that to be happened. But I do want teachers to know, and I want superintendents to have a clear understanding, starting July 1, when they get their new disbursements, it's under the new budget that was passed. So teachers are entitled to their pay raise, and that should be happening. Then, when will this be on the ballot is kind of the next question. The latest possible time would be in November. And like I said, hopefully what will happen, and even, as floor leader, I talk to all sides. That's my job. My job is to know everybody. And the people that are circulating the petition, several of them have said they're fine with the special election. When you talk to the education community, they want it on the election as quickly as possible, because the worst thing you can have for the state of Oklahoma is uncertainty. That's as bad as it gets. So what we're hoping to have is to move that process quickly.
Good. Well, that's great. Trying to think if I left, you've covered a lot of ground in a short amount of time here.
Well, it's almost like I get asked this question a lot. So, so some frequently asked questions, just so viewers that have turned in, so they kind of understand what to expect, is always a good question.
Right.
The deadline for signatures hits about the middle of July. So the next big steps, if you're for repealing 1010, if you're against repealing 1010, the next steps you need to be looking at are what's going to happen with the Supreme Court. I expect that decision ending of June is when I expect we'll get a decision, maybe first part of July. Then by the middle of July, that's when they're going to have the signatures done. So we'll know at that point whether or not those signatures are going to be certified. Then, even if they get the $46,000, 46,000 and change, I think I said 70, I think it's closer to 46,000 signatures. I will admit, even me, all these numbers get mixed up in my head. Then there's a possibility of what's called a signature challenge. So somebody could go before the court and say these signatures weren't gathered correctly. You have to have a notary, and the notary didn't have a bond, or that they.
And that pretty much always happens, right?
It's happened in every signature case that I've ever seen in Oklahoma history.
Right.
But the bottom line is, I think that people are going to have their opportunity through this initiative petition, which is part of our or through this referendum, referendum petition, which is different, which is part of our Constitution, to give the citizens a voice. And then if it goes through that process, what they need to hear from your legislature is we're planning ahead. If the signatures are gathered, we're going to come in and appropriate the cash. That's the strong position of the House. Sometimes I say things as Rep. John Echols, sometimes I say things as floor leader. This is as floor leader. Our plan from the House side would be to come in, appropriate cash so there's no stopping the funding, and then to put that on a ballot as quickly as possible. Because like I said, what we need, Mike, is finality. What we need is whatever it's going to be, that's what we need to know.
It seems interesting to me that we've been wanting our government to work for so long, and the big criticism is you guys can't get anything done. And then for the first time in 30 years, we have a revenue measure passed, an emergency revenue measure that passed with 75%. 2/3 of those were Republicans, I believe. And to me, that seems like our democracy worked pretty well. And the people's representatives spoke, and the governor signed it into law. It just seems kind of chaotic to do anything else about that, but it's the people's right to do that.
And it's in their Constitution. And I would actually argue that this was probably the most productive legislative session. I often hear, why don't you do something? My goodness, we did a lot. If you like audits, we passed an audit bill 2 years ago. Those audits are ongoing. They're starting to be written about. I've heard campaigns on, why don't we audit every agency? That bill has already been passed. That's already started to have independent audits of every agency.